Hi everyone, thanks for watching. In today's video, I'd like to briefly cover 3 news stories that are of interest as we're now just a few days into 2022. First, late yesterday, Trump canceled his press conference that was originally scheduled for January 6th at Mar-a-Lago. Trump claimed he had canceled the event in light of the total bias and dishonesty of the House Select Committee investigating the attack on the Capitol, as well as the fake news media. This, of course, was a complete lie. According to Axios, Fox News host Laura Ingraham and Senator Lindsey Graham both made clear that they thought it was a bad idea to invite the national media to Mar-a-Lago to mark the deadly riot. The event also stirred up a great deal of anxiety among Republicans who feared that the party and its candidates could be forced to relitigate the 2020 election as the 2022 midterms approached, especially if Trump caused an uproar defending the attack on the Capitol. And that certainly would have happened, as Trump would have inevitably used his press conference on January 6th to portray the rioters as political prisoners, whitewash their actions that day, and rant about a stolen election. While plenty of people referred to last January 6th as Insurrection Day, Trump and his supporters now promote the idea that the real Insurrection Day was November 3rd of 2020, the day they claimed the election was stolen. Now, I realize that some of you are convinced that there was massive fraud in the election, costing Trump his victory. From what I've seen, however, the so-called evidence for a stolen election is ludicrous at best, and all of this is really just a case of a man who will do or say anything to get back in power. But before any of us get caught up in this right versus left mirage, it is important to remind ourselves that Christians shouldn't be looking to one political party or the other to save us. Neither the Republicans nor the Democrats, and certainly not Trump, can save anyone. Only Jesus can. Coincidentally, January 6th is also the Epiphany, a Christian feast day that celebrates the revealing of God as personified in Jesus Christ. The Feast of the Epiphany is sometimes referred to as Three Kings Day, and in some traditions it is celebrated as Little Christmas. A few days back, I glanced at a couple of pro-Trump YouTube channels, and sure enough, I found a number of comments that viewed Trump's speech happening on the Feast of Epiphany as yet another sign that he has, in fact, been chosen by God. Now that his press conference has been canceled, I'm sure they will blame anyone but Trump. Yesterday, Trump said that many of the issues he was going to address on January 6th will now be talked about during a January 15th rally he's holding in Arizona. Thus, instead of dealing with an adversarial media on January 6th, Trump will now air his grievances in front of an enduring crowd just over a week later. I certainly see 2022 as a very dangerous year for America, even before the midterm elections roll around. Whenever Trump speaks this year, starting with that January 15th rally, we're going to see him ratchet up the rhetoric about a stolen election to even higher levels than we've heard before. And Trump's rhetoric over the past year has led to some of the most hateful and threatening voicemails and emails you can imagine directed at those state and local officials involved in the elections. In the description below, I'll put a link to a superb story from Reuters called Anatomy of a Death Threat, which details the ugliness that has arisen from the bottomless pit. Please be forewarned that there is a great deal of profanity in that article, and the content is very disturbing. But it does clearly show the kind of hatred that is bubbling just beneath the surface in our country, much of which is due to Trump's claim of the election being stolen from him. Trump's so-called big lie does continue to convince many on the right that he is the rightful president. A recent poll showed that nearly 3/4 of Republicans still believe that the election was stolen from Trump. This despite numerous audits of election results showing no such thing. Indeed, there are also millions of Americans who not only believe that the election was stolen, but are ready, willing, and able to take any action necessary to restore Trump to power. And in the coming weeks and months, Trump is going to rile them up even more than he already has. The Bible tells us that in the last days a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. And understanding dark sentences is precisely what Trump excels at. He molds his own reality by casting truth to the ground and replacing it with what he wants to be true. And those that follow the Antichrist not only believe that what he says is true, but they perceive him as being a force for good, a man that deserves their loyalty and respect. And they will not be easily convinced otherwise about him, because this delusion is very, very strong. Second, in a speech at Turning Point USA about 3 weeks back, Donald Trump Jr. made an interesting comment about the Bible and specifically turning the other cheek. Here's a brief clip.
This will be contrary to a lot of our beliefs because I'd love not to have to participate in cancel culture. I'd love that it didn't exist. But as long as it does, folks, we better be playing the same game. Okay? We've been playing T-ball for half a century while they're playing hardball and cheating. Right? We've turned the other cheek, and I understand sort of the biblical reference. I understand the mentality. But it's gotten us nothing. Okay? It's gotten us nothing.
Let's focus in on this part of what he said. This will be contrary to a lot of our beliefs. We have turned the other cheek, and I understand sort of the biblical reference. I understand the mentality, but it's gotten us nothing, okay? It's gotten us nothing. It's not that Trump Jr. is the first person to ever mock the Bible's teaching of turning the other cheek. The problem is that his father is viewed by the majority of Christians as defending Christianity when the exact opposite is happening right in front of our eyes. And this is yet another example of how Trumpism is poisoning the church. Trump's America first, politics first, winning first attitude is leading many Christians astray. So many Christians who used to try and live a godly life based on the Bible's teachings are now putting politics, America, and Donald J. Trump in particular above their faith. Finally, news broke a couple weeks back that the U.S. Army is developing a super vaccine of sorts. The new vaccine will fight against a whole range of COVID-19 and SARS origin variants, although they have yet to test it against the Omicron variant. Scientists at the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research expect to officially announce the new vaccine in just a couple of weeks after nearly 2 years of research that began with the DNA sequencing of the COVID-19 virus in early 2020. They are hopeful that this new vaccine will be effective against such a wide range of both COVID-19 and SARS origin variants that it could replace other older vaccines that only fought against one virus or one variant of that virus. I mention this story because I know that many Christians, including a number of those who are now watching this video, consider current vaccines to be the mark. However, I continue to urge caution on this, and let me tell you why. As the new vaccine from the U.S. Army demonstrates, there will be updated advancements in technology that will render current vaccines obsolete over the next year or two. What works today to combat one virus will likely not work against certain variants of that virus or against an entirely different pestilence. Personally, I doubt that COVID-19 is the one and only pestilence in the last days. I believe we will see several more pandemics before the great and fearful day of the Lord arrives. And because of that, we will see many new and different vaccines to try and combat those pestilences. What we should be concerned with, however, are the vaccine mandates and how their far-reaching power to limit one's ability to buy and sell might eventually be implemented. But it's the mandates themselves that hold the power in this and not a specific vaccine. For example, a mandate in one city or with one employer could easily be modified to require the new vaccine that the U.S. Army is developing, and older vaccines that many have taken over the past year will no longer be relevant to that mandate. So for the many of you who are convinced that the mark is now here, I just want to point out that vaccines are changing all the time. A year, 2 years or so down the road, there will be a totally new and different vaccine that will be tied into those mandates. It's the mandates that we need to keep our eyes on, as potentially they hold all the power to prevent people from being able to buy and sell. So that's all for today. Thank you for watching, and if you care to leave a comment, please do. As always, please be respectful in any comment you leave, especially towards those with whom you disagree. I'll talk to you guys soon.